Okay, rook versus connected pass pawns and checkmate threat salvation. I've already covered this particular position on the rook versus 2 connected pass pawns 1 video as one of the sort of the basics that we just need to understand, which is that if both kings are not on the scene, these 2 pawns are just unstoppable against the rook. If it's black to play, it's a very easy win for black. Rook g2 paralyses the pawns, rook g5, it's very easy, the white king's nowhere to be seen. And if it's white to win, it's also pretty straightforward, h6. But when I set this position up, I just shoved the kings anywhere over on the A file to just demonstrate this pretty simple concept, to be honest. There's not much to understand about it. I sort of inadvertently put the black king a little bit too close to the action, so that, although this is still 1 for white, black can play king b4 and then pray that white plays h7. It's a very easy win for white if they just don't allow the black king to come to b3. g7 does that and it's done. Okay, black might come to a3. The reason that g7 was relevant is because that g8 queen arrives with check if the black king's on b3. King a3 would probably still be tried. King b1, and yeah, you can't bring the king to b3, and the checkmate threats run out before they've even started. But what I didn't realise when I set up the position is at this stage, you know, sort of almost intending when I recorded the video to say, oh, and it's easy, you can just do whatever here, you know, you can play h7, you can play g7. You can't play h7 here, because black sets up this checkmate threat with king b3. You think, well, it's alright, I'll just play king b1. But then black plays rook h2, which threatens checkmate again. And you've got to move the king. You've absolutely got to move the king. King c1, black just keeps renewing the checkmate threat. There's no point in going left because the black king will just follow you. The only possible way to make progress here as white is to follow move along the first rank all the way to attack the rook with king g1. But now black can play rook h6, and the only move that makes any sense at all for white here, that doesn't just lose sort of obviously, is g7. And you're like, well, I've got rid of your checkmate threat, and now I've got these 2. You're in big trouble. And black's not in big trouble. They can just keep going with the checkmate threats and the checks. Rook g6 check. The king can't go to h2. Well, it can, but it just gets checked and we end up in the same position we're just in, more or less. So the king just has to go this way. Don't play rook h6 here, because g8 equals queen would then be able to form a block. You've just got to be careful as you keep renewing these checkmate threats that at any given stage these queening moves don't do anything. So g8 equals queen. Well, that would deliver a check if the black king was ever on b3. h8 equals queen is never really going to do anything. Unless you've left your rook on h6. In fact, I think rook h6 there as well. h8 equals queen would also have been good enough, wouldn't it? Because you're sort of x-ray covering h1 and black would just have to lose their rook. So you always have to think about, in these checkmate threat salvation positions, about what's going to happen at any given time if white queens one of their pawns. But here white can't queen either of their pawns because rook h1 is going to be checkmate. So all white can really do to make any progress is to come all the way over to the queen side, and then we see the same checks. Notice that the black king in its journey over here was never on a square that could get checked by the promotion of either of those 2 pawns. So white's like, right, well, I'll go back over this side. Alright, you go back over that side. It's just a draw. White can't make progress. Yeah, a really clever drawing resource to look out for, even when it looks completely hopeless. And let's face it, that original position was completely hopeless. I mean, it is completely hopeless. White plays h6. You just play king b4 and hope black plays h7. Right, next, this is a study from 1851, about 174 years old, is that? So this is sort of the best part of 200 years old. They were studying this. White to play. Uh-oh. Big trouble. That rook's not going to stop those 2 pawns. But the black king is quite close to the edge of the board. What are you going to do? I mean, the first move's obvious, really. Just a series of only moves. If the black king goes up, the white king just goes up. We just keep renewing the checkmating threats. And there's nothing black can do against these checkmate threats except to come down the h-file and play king h2. But now the black king is on the second rank, and that means that rook takes b2 arrives with check. Nice little trick. And that gives us time to start bringing the king over. King e3. If black plays king g3, off the second rank, the checks start again. And you just keep following the king. King h4, for example. King f4. We're kind of going around in circles a little bit, except black has to be careful here. King h2, an attempt to win, would actually be now a losing move, because rook b1. Black's in zugzwang there, which wasn't true when the rook was on b1 already. So yeah, there's this position with white to move. We played king e3. This position with black to move. Black would probably have to resign, to be honest. That's a bit of a tragedy. So yeah, king g3. We can just rook g1 check, and there's just not anything that that black can do. So instead of rook king g3, black would play king g2. So you can't play rook g1 check. But the thing is, you've now left your king on the second rank. So the rook takes b2 would still arrive with check, so we've got time for another king move. King d3. King f3. I mean, the engine's giving lots of drawing moves here. There's king c2, king c3, and rook takes the pawn straight away. Of course, they're all obvious. But even rook f1 check draws it at this stage. But yeah, king c3, a2, king takes b2. It's a draw. So yeah, white in this position managed to save themselves in what looks like a hopeless case with checkmate threat against this black king that's sort of stuck to the edge of the board. Right, next, this is a game from 1956. Hopefully we're picking up a theme by now, not least from the title of the video. But guess what white did here? Have a guess. What do you reckon white did? 1956, this game happened. Was that 69 years ago? White resigned. Like, wow. Yeah. I mean, you can at least play a few token moves. Play king d6 and hope black doesn't see it. I mean, I think I know why white resigned, although I'm only guessing. I doubt the person's still alive. I could seek them out and find them, but I think I know why white resigned. I'm assuming they were quite a good player and had analysed sort of a good few moves ahead, but failed to see a sort of continuation of the drawing resource. They didn't resign because they were worried black went that way. I know that's not the case. Black would even get mated if they insisted on carrying on going that way. I think what they saw was that the black king comes to c8, and you just sort of straight away run out of checkmating threats. But you can check on the c file. If the king goes to d8, you can just go back to b1. So the king would have to come to the b file. I don't think it actually makes any difference whether it's b8 or b7. I actually haven't got king b7 in my list, but the only difference is that the black king can come straight to a6. So there, king c6, and we've transposed, I reckon. I think we're about to see this position in a second anyway, so that's the only advantage I can see of king b7. So rook b1 check, and the only move that doesn't go around in circles is king a7. King c7, king a6, there's the transposition, if black had insisted on playing king b7 straight away. So I think white resigned because they saw this, but then just saw, well, yeah, but the black king's just going to come down the a file, hit the rook, checkmate threats are over, and I've had it, so I'll resign. But the extra, or the continuation really, of the drawing resource that white must have failed to clock was that, yeah, sure, the king can come and attack the rook, but just like the 1851 study, once the king hits the second rank, rook takes f2 is going to arrive with check. So what would black do here? They're actually in that zugzwang position where they've lost the game now, if they're not careful. Luckily, they've got an h-pawn, so they can get out of it like that. Okay, h5, king d3. Start moving our way towards the pawns, and if g2, we can just take on f2 with check. So black's really got nothing more sensible to do than get their king off the second rank, and king e2. It's a draw. So white could have drawn that. I mean, we're going to take the pawn next move, or if g2, we're going to take it with the king. Yeah, absolutely brilliant. You wouldn't. It does look pretty bad, doesn't it? You wouldn't think that there is a drawing resource there, but there is with those checkmate threats. So hopefully we've got that one sorted now, and we will be on the lookout for it in our games. And then if you've got that, you know, as your, would you call it? I wouldn't call it base knowledge particularly, because it's more an idea, but it's just an idea to have in your, well, on your radar, really, isn't it? An idea that you need to have. Next, 1961 study. We will need that knowledge in this study, somewhere in this study. There's a clue to have a go at working out what your move should be as white, and once you've solved it, just think, have I really solved it? Am I missing a little trick somewhere, maybe? That's the way that good studies, they always get you, don't they? You think you've solved it, and it's like you've missed a subtlety. I hope you got the first move. You'd have to be pretty... Well, you'd have to have just not looked at it, really, to understand the first move. I mean, that black's got a checkmate threat here, and there is no way to stop it other than checking a black. And black's got to maintain contact with the h-pawn. They've got to renew that checkmate threat, because as soon as the king loses contact with the h-pawn, we just queen. And the h-pawn, you know, rook a1 check does nothing. We just play king takes h2. So we've only got one move, which is rook g6 check, and now king h3, and it's... What's white got here, other than just a perpetual? And it's one of those studies you sort of get by process of elimination, because if this is white to play and win, which it is, you wouldn't know that if you're playing a game of chess. You'd maybe just take the perpetual. Your only winning try here is, of course, rook g1. Now, if I was playing this in a game, I don't think we've got any reason not to play those moves. And then this is the bit where you look at your clock. You're well aware rook g1 is a winning try, but it's also a possible blunder if you haven't calculated properly. Although it doesn't look like there's much chance to lose that there. But, you know, famous last words. So I would now be, depending how much time I'd left, be analysing rook g1 a lot. And if I was in big time trouble, I might just take that perpetual, I'm not sure. It is, of course, the winning move. Rook g1, check, king takes g1. And now, I wonder if... yes, and now one subtlety to this situation. Oh, yes, of course, sorry. If black plays king g3, we can queen. Okay, because this check we would block with queen f1. So yeah, black's only move in this situation is to play rook a8. They can't set up the checkmate threat because it's not a checkmate threat. f8 queen and queen f1 intercepts. So you think fantastic. Okay. Except this is the bit where you had to think a bit further. If you now play e6, which is a perfectly natural move, you've just thrown away the win. Because this time black can play king g3. Now they're guarding the f8 square. f8 equals queen is obviously a ridiculous move. And now we're threatening rook a1 check. And there's no way for white to get out of these checks. These checkmate threats, sorry. King b1, rook b8 check, king a2. It just keeps going. There is just no way for white to make any progress. At any given time, remember, we have to watch whether the queening of one of these two pawns does anything. It doesn't, because the rook's guarding the f8 square. So we just follow the white king around, draw. Which means, back in this position after rook a8, white is winning, but you have to just get your king out the way. King f2. Rook f8, then we protect the pawn, e6, and black's got one last try, which is try and bring the king in, king g4, e7 obviously, e7 loses the game because rook takes f7, it arrives with check, but we just get our king off the f file, and it's over. Black can, I was about to say black can resign there with a clear conscience, but I wouldn't resign there with a clear conscience. Actually, I would fully accept the fact I'm about to defend a rook versus queen and give it a go. Why not? You might as well. You know, if Stockfish can defend it against me when I try and do it, and it seems to get to the 50 moves more often than I win it when I've practiced it, then why can't I defend it against someone who's plays as badly as me? Right, one last one. This is a study from 1983. Pause the video on it, spend ages on it. You could easily spend a good 20 minutes, half an hour on this one. Feel free to move the pieces around, check out all the various things that could go on. There's all sorts of different ideas along the same theme, and the theme is obviously this black king is close to the edge of the board. But also featured in this study is this black king is close to this edge of the board. But the first move's fairly obvious, rook g3 check. And now if black plays king h7, it's a pretty easy win. King f6, and when the b pawn is pushed, can't push the a pawn because the rook takes b3. We've got rook g7, king h8, rook to b7, and when the b pawn is defended, king g6. Game over. Or if instead of pushing the b pawn, black plays king h8, rook g7 is going to transpose to what we just looked at. So after rook g3 check, black has a much more stubborn defense, which is king h8. So now rook g7 is not going to arrive with check. And king f7 is not as good because we haven't got the threat of that second checkmate. And there's only one winning move here. The first time I attempted this, I got all the sort of the right ideas, but I didn't find this move, and I sort of carried on concentrating on bringing the king in. But your second move is rook g6. Absolutely brilliant. Black will push the b pawn, and then you go rook over to b6, attack that b pawn. So black defends it. And now you bring the king in, king f7, you're threatening, obviously, rook takes h6, check. Which doesn't look particularly dangerous, to be honest. Black just plays king h7. You've sort of run out of checks, your king's in the way of rook b7 check. And these pawns, with everything else being equal, are going to queen, they're going to beat the rook by themselves. So what do you do now? And I guess it's because it's a study, you might have been thinking the entire time, what's this g pawn on the board for? What's that there for? You don't think that in chess, that g pawn's on the board because you've just played a game of chess and your opponent never took it. But in a study, that g pawn's there because it's part of the study. g4. Bosh. Take that. What does black do? They're in big trouble. A2 seems the sort of the only obvious way to progress. Just saying to white, well, I'm about to get a queen now. What are you going to do about that? And white plays G5. Now this threatens two different checkmates. Rook takes H6 mate and G6 check. G6 check, followed by G7 check, followed by G8 equals queen check, followed by, followed by queen G7, which will be mate, depending on where the black pawn is. Or if the black pawn's moved, we would just do Rook H6 check instead. The Rook takes H6 mate would be needed to be used against B1 equals queen, which would guard the G6 square. But white's threatening two different checkmates. And black just has to deal with that. The only move that doesn't allow checkmate in one is to take the G pawn. But then the H file's open and you can play Rook takes B2. A1 equals queen. Very sporting of black to let white demonstrate the finish to this beautiful puzzle. Study. Rook H2 checkmate. I really enjoyed that one. Thought it was a fantastic study. Like all studies, unlikely to be directly applicable in your games, but you know, the ideas. That was a 1956 game where white just resigned, and the original position that I set up. I mean, that wasn't a game. I just sort of set up something typical to demonstrate the power of the two connected passed pawns against the solitary rook. And like I said, I sort of inadvertently set up a position where a bit of clumsiness here, and black can use checkmate threats to save the game. Right, calling it a day there. Hope everyone enjoyed that and thinks they got something out of it.